Hey, it's Clay. Welcome to another League of Legends video. This time I'm going to try something new. I would like to go through my personal tier list, focusing on AD carries or Marksman. Tier lists are something that I check out every once in a while. I think they're interesting to look at, and it's kind of cool to see how people kind of rate different champions. And so I'm going to try my hand at making a tier list. I've never done this before on my channel, but I want to give it a shot. And so basically, I'm going to start with 80 carries because I feel there are a couple of nice things. First of all, the champion pool is a little bit smaller, and it's more clearly defined. You know, there isn't as much, if you go to like top lane or mid lane, there's a whole bunch of debate about even what champions to include in that list, and then on top of that, the list is going to be very long. So, where do you draw the line at like picks that are just bad or picks that are unconventional? On 80 carry, it's a little bit more clear cut. And also, I've played the most amount of 80 carry. I've played all of the champions in 80 carry, whereas there are other roles that I haven't even played. Some of the champions, like certain mid laners that I've never even touched. There are even champions that I have unlocked that I've never even played, specifically mages, just because that's the kind of champions that I play the least. So I play the most amount of 80 carry, so I feel the most knowledgeable on these champions. And also just to give you guys a basis for how I made this kind of these. I basically just took a list of all of the 80 carries and I just kind of put them in a ranking based on my personal opinions. I'm not bringing any sort of statistics or any sort of like win rates or pick rates or ban rates or anything like that. I'm just basically going on my own personal feel, and this is applied to solo queue. This is not a competitive tier list. This is purely based on solo queue. I'm in gold right now. I think I'm in gold 3 or something like that, so keep that in mind and give that whatever you will. So anyways, let's go ahead and get into the list. I broke it down into 3 tiers, so that kind of gives you a bit of a feeling. I am going to go through what I would think would be the strongest to the weakest, but within the tiers there could be some variation, and there are some champions that are a little bit, not as clear-cut in terms of what tier they should be in, but I think I've got a pretty good list. So anyways, first of all, let's go ahead and start with my number 180 carry, which is going to be Caitlyn. Caitlyn is, I think, the strongest solo queue 80 carry. And there are a couple reasons for this. I think that this right here, 650 range, is the number one reason why she's number 1 on my list. And basically her range, specifically with her auto attacks and her Q, just gives her such tremendous laning power right from level 1. I believe that most people would agree that Caitlyn is one of the strongest laning champions in the entire game right at level 1, just because she has such incredible range. And at level 1, pretty much all the champions are kind of on even footing, but having that extra almost 100 range over most other AD carries just gives her the ability to really control what's going on. And the reason that I put Caitlyn at number 1 isn't because she's like the hardest carry or she's the best per se. The main reason is because she has the greatest potential to control the lane herself, whereas other AD carries are very much, they can get counterpicked, they can get bullied around by a really good support, whereas Caitlyn has the greatest autonomy. So if you're playing with a bad support, if you've ever complained about getting a bad support, then you want to start playing Caitlyn, because she can be very much independent of her support. She is very, very capable of farming. There's really no counter picks to her. Leona maybe would be a counter pick, maybe somebody like Sivir or Graves, somebody who has a lot of burst. But even then, like, those champions have low auto attack range. So if Caitlyn is able to poke them down, she's going to do really well. So basically, Caitlyn's number 1 on my list because she is consistently, capable of carrying herself and getting herself into a strong position in the mid game. Her 650 range is always going to be good. And she also has nice mobility with her 90 caliber net. I think having some sort of mobility is almost a requirement for a very strong AD carry, and that's something you'll notice. I think in solo queue, that's something you'll notice on my list, is that I very much value AD carries that have some sort of mobility or repositioning skill, because in solo queue it's very important to be able to get away or escape, or just have some way of peeling for yourself. And so Caitlyn can use her 90 caliber net. It's a perfect ability because it will slow and it will create distance. So if that Renekton jumps on top of you with his slice and dice, you can just E onto him, and all of a sudden, he just can't get on top of you again. So that's I put Caitlyn number 1. I think she's a strong pick. There are other picks that maybe could be contested with her, but those are picks that are more based on like balance changes. But Caitlyn is somebody who's always going to be strong and is always going to be consistent. So that's why she's my number 1. Number 2, I'm actually going to go with Sivir. Sivir got a nice rework along with her visual update, and she has been insanely popular. Just tearing up solo queue. There are a couple of reasons for this. So first of all, Sivir has her passive gives her some nice mobility, and this is really important. She doesn't have any sort of like a blink ability, but she does have her passive, which isn't really the perfect mobility skill, but she also complements that with a spell shield. This is really something that makes Sivir very unique, and this is the best reason to play Sivir. Her spell shield really can change the dynamic of certain lane matchups. Champions like Thresh or Blitzcrank specifically, with their really like telegraphed hooks, those are very easy spells to spell shield. Or even like Sona, Janna, these champions that have these very telegraphed spells where Sona's going to run towards you, she's going to hit Q when she gets in range. You can just spell shield that and give yourself some free mana. It really changes the lane dynamics of a lot of these matchups. On top of that, her Q is a very, very powerful high damage spell. And so that gives her some really, really nice damage. Her W gives her fantastic wave clear, so her farming potential with her Q and her W is through the roof, which is really, really nice. And then her On the Hunt is like the best team fight ability. It's on an AD carry. It's so, so good, giving yourself and your allies this big movement speed buff. You can use it for chasing. You can use it for disengage. It's just so, so strong. It makes Sivir very, very good in team fights. There have been a lot of situations where, we kind of, you get caught off guard a lot by an enemy Sivir, who ults, and then all of a sudden all 5 members of your team catch people off guard. It just very much is so powerful in late game team fights. And so yeah, her big weakness is her 500 range, and if you can exploit that, it makes her weak. It's the reason why I didn't put her at number 1, but specifically with her Q and her E and her ultimate, it just gives her a lot of really, really strong tools. And it makes her very powerful. Also, I really can't argue with her win rate. It's been through the roof, like nearing 55% for a little while now. So I think she's definitely proven to be a very, very powerful pick. Next up on my list is going to be Jinx. Now, I think that... is she not in this list? That's actually kind of weird. So the reason that I actually thought about putting her a little bit lower, but I kept her up here. And I think the main reason why is because I think that Jinx is one of the strongest laners. Her laning is just so, so good. Whenever I'm playing Jinx, I just feel very confident in my laning. It's very difficult to trade with her, especially in these extended bot lane trades because of her Q. It just gives her so much bonus attack speed, and the longer that your trades go on, the better she gets. So her trading is really good in lane. Also, she has really good crowd control on demand with her E and her W. Her W is like crazy, crazy, crazy long range. 1500 range on a 6-second cooldown that does a ton of damage. This is a really, really good ability. And then her E gives her a 1.5 second snare. She just gives her really, really strong laning potential. As well as her Super Mega Death Rocket gives her tons of kill potential at level 6. And then on top of that, she gets her passive. And I really think her passive is one of the strongest parts of her kit. I've gotten a couple of pentas on Jinx, just simply because I feel like in team fights, if you can get one kill early on, it can really snowball out of control. She's almost like a Katarina version of an AD carry. And so it really, and this is kind of what puts her over the top. So she's got great damage, she's got great crowd control, she's got great execution, and then she also has great snowball pentakill potential. And I think in solo queue, this is a really powerful recipe. Her big weakness is obviously, her lack of escape. Especially in a defensive situation, if she's getting camped by a jungler, she's going to have a hard time. But generally, you can almost make up for that with her crowd control. A well-placed Flame Chompers can usually dispel even the best of ganks. And then on top of that, she does only have 525 auto attack range with her minigun, which is a little bit of a weakness. But I am going to stick with Jinx in this position. Her solo queue potential is really high. Her laning is strong. She's got crowd control. She's got snowball potential. It makes her a very, very strong pick. if she had an escape ability, she'd be straight up OP. So that's where I'm going to put Jinx, and I'm going to stand by that pick. So next up, I am going to throw out Lucian. Now, this is really bothering me that this list is not worth it. I was really hoping that this would be better, but I guess I can just do this. So Lucian is, I actually have thought that he was strong ever since he was released. The community kind of instantly said, oh my gosh, this champion is trash. Why play him? You know, there was a lot of backlash against him, and I think a lot of it was focused on his ultimate. I think that people, like a lot of the, especially, you know, when people were heard about Lucian coming out or kind of watched his champion spot, like a lot of noise is made about his ultimate. And the thing is that his ultimate isn't really that good for what you maybe would think that it would be really good for. In terms of like fighting, you know, or dueling or finishing off kills, those types of things, it really isn't that useful in terms of fighting in lane. It's very, very good for wave clear. It's very good for chasing down opponents who are, you know, running in a very predictable, maybe a jungle corridor at long range. The range is very good. But other than that, it's really not that strong. However, I think that his passive in combination with his basic abilities is really, really good. And this is what makes Lucian strong. And this is the reason why he's in my top tier on my tier list. You know, his passive specifically is so good. You know, a Q auto, W auto, E auto is going to do a ton of damage. It's almost impossible for your opponents to trade with him. He's got very good scaling. His Q specifically is a very, very strong ability. And also his E, giving him not only the gap close, but also the slow removal, which is really, really good. You know, especially against champions like Nasus, who can be the bane of AD carries. You know, Lucian is really, really good against someone like Nasus just because he can use his passive and his abilities and his E to totally nullify a lot of what makes Nasus good against AD carries. You know, he's a very strong AD caster, you know, so you definitely want to be focusing on like a BT, Trinity Force, Last Whisperer, you know, those kinds of items are really good on Lucian. But I think he's very strong. He's got great mobility, he's got really good damage, he's got good trading in lane, and his teamfight is really good too. You know, I think his teamfight is very underrated just because, you know, he's got such strong mobility, and like I said, his damage is so high. So I think Lucian definitely deserves to be a strong pick, and I think the biggest thing was that the community didn't like. He's definitely one of those champions that when he was released, the community didn't really know how to best utilize him, or it just wasn't as clear. Like a lot of people were building Blade of the Ruin King and trying to get a ton of attack speed to maximize his ultimate, and that's really not the way to go. The best builds maximize his AD, focusing on his passive and his Q and his W. So anyways, I do think Lucian is a very strong pick. And again, kind of similar to Caitlyn, he has some really good autonomy. You know, he can poke with his Q, he can farm from a distance with his Q and his W. He's got good trading with his passive. He's got good farming potential, good wave clear, you know, and very good mobility, so he's got self-peel. You know, he's capable of kind of handling his own. If people jump on him, he can deal with it. You know, he's definitely somebody who doesn't need a ton of peel, which I think is very important. So that's where I have Lucian. So my next pick is going to be Ezreal. I think Ezreal and Lucian are very similar type champions, and Ezreal is, I think, a stalwart of a top tier AD carry. So the things about Ezreal is that he's got tremendous mobility with his E, and he also has really good, his Q is just a really good ability. It's got a low cooldown, it's got long range, scales really, really well, especially if you get like a Trinity Force, get that Spellblade proc going, got a global ultimate. You know, he's just got a lot of good things going for him. Ezreal, I think, is probably the safest AD carry to play. You know, in comparison with Caitlyn, her net isn't quite as reliable, and it can be interrupted, and it's just not as good of an escape, whereas Ezreal's E is the best repositioning ability in the game, I think, in my opinion. His laning is very safe with his Q. He can almost always farm, at least, you know, moderately successfully, even in the worst of lanes, just because his Q allows him to farm from such a long distance. And he's just a very safe, strong, all-around pick. Got a lot of different build paths. You can still go blue build. I still go blue build from time to time if there are a lot of bruisers with gap closers that I'm going to need to kite. I still think blue build has its strengths, but his Trinity Force build has a really strong mid-game power spike that is especially potent in solo queue. You know, Trinity Force BT Last Whisper is such a good solo queue build because, you know, it gives him tremendous mid-game potential. He can really snowball a game out of control. And if you can land Qs, if you can just land Q after Q after Q, Ezreal is a real force to be reckoned with. I think in terms of weaknesses, Ezreal doesn't quite have the hyper carry potential late game, and especially because his Q can be blocked. He can have a harder time shredding down tanks in comparison to some of our other carries. And he doesn't have the best range from his auto attacks, so that's kind of why people focus on his Qs. But overall, I think Ezreal is just a very safe, solid, strong pick. And then my next pick, and this is actually going to be the last pick in my tier 1, is going to be Vayne. I think Vayne... I'm going to say a couple things about Vayne. So first of all, I think of all these AD carries, she arguably has the highest damage and the best late game scaling. I think the only one I would maybe put her up against would be Kog'Maw, but her late game damage is just through the roof, specifically because of her silver bolts. I think about maybe a quarter to a third of her damage comes from her silver bolts in a late game situation, so that makes her just a perfect champion against tanks. She is an absolute tank shredder, giving her true damage that is percent max health. So there's almost no way to itemize defensively against Vayne. You're still going to want to stack a lot of armor, I think is probably your best bet, just because still 80% of her damage is physical, but she's got tremendous true damage against tanks. Her Q is also a really good, 2-second cooldown that gives her repositioning, that gives her bonus AD. This ability is really, really good, and this is definitely Vayne's best ability, make no mistake. And then on top of that, she's got great self-peel. With her Condemn, you can get the stun, you can keep bruisers away from you, and then she's got a fantastic steroid on her ultimate. Basically, her kit just gives her tremendous damage, tremendous mobility, tremendous dueling potential. She's the best champion in the game against tanks. It's a really, really strong combination. Her only weakness, and the only reason I don't have her higher on the list, is because of this. Her 550 range is all she's got. She has nothing that can extend beyond 550 range, and that can make her laning very weak, especially against. She has some really strong counter picks like Caitlyn, or maybe Varus. Any champion with long range can really give her fits. And I've seen a lot of times where Vayne will really get shut down in lane, and we'll get to a point where the CS is like 70-40, and you just hit level 6, and they already have a BF sword while you have 2 Doran's blades, and it just makes it very difficult to come back. However, that said, Vayne's mid game is really, really strong. And with a good support, she can often come back from a poor early game very well. Good Vayne's players will know, you just try to survive to about level 6, and then you want to try to maybe do an all-in or something to get a kill, to get yourself back in the game. And then from there, I can't tell you how many times I've played Caitlyn, and from a poor jungle gank, or maybe my support gets caught out of position, Vayne picks up a kill, and all of a sudden all that hard work that I put in the early laning phase to shut Vayne down goes to waste. So she's just a really tough champion to deal with. Really, her range is only her weakness. If you can get on top of her, she still has tools to deal with you between her Tumble, her Blade of the Rune King, and her Condemn. It's going to make her very strong. But, I think she's balanced because her laning is so weak. You can shut her down, but if you don't, watch out because she's really scary. So that kind of covers my Tier 1 list. I think any champion in Tier 1 you can really rely on and pick very safely and reliably and do a lot of work. Let's move into Tier 2. So these are champions that I think are, average to above average. I think they're okay picks. Definitely not champions that you can really run away and just they're good and they can do their job. But I think that there are some times where I would rather pick someone else from Tier 1. So anyways, the first pick in my Tier 2 is going to be Tristana. So Tristana has a couple of things going for her. First of all, her passive, and is this really not going to work? Okay, that's kind of annoying. Let's go ahead and try this. Sorry about this, guys. Okay, so a couple things I want to say about Tristana. Her passive and her Q are arguably some of the best abilities in the entire game for AD carries. Specifically having this range. Max rank is a 703 total range is so good. If you can make it to a late game situation, Tristana is a really strong hyper carry. And she's right up there with Vayne because, even though she doesn't have the same amount of damage output, her range keeps her so safe. She's a really, really safe late game AD carry. Partly because of her passive and also her Q. A 90% attack speed boost is so powerful. Definitely makes her a real threat, like I said, in the late game. Here we go. In a late game situation, this 90% is so absurdly high. I believe this is one of the best on-demand attack speed steroids for 7 seconds of just total god mode. Makes her a real tank shredder just because you're getting, these crits with this 90% attack speed. I.e. PD Last Whisper plus 90% attack speed is just like GG. Really, really good. Now, her rocket jump is a really good skill also. It's one of the longest range escape abilities, so it gives her tremendous, range mobility, and also it resets. So if it gets strong and she's able to carry, she can really, definitely a pentakill type champion, where she can just, Goomba stop from one to another. And then her explosive shot is also a pretty strong ability. The passive gives her really good farming potential and wave clear. And then the active is actually really good in lane. It definitely falls off by the mid game, and then it becomes pretty useless in the late game. But the early game poking is just a point and click, damage over time ability is really, really good. It can be countered by someone like Janna or Lulu, who has got a shield that can just kind of shield off all of that damage over time. But still, for laning, for trading, this is a really good. An auto E-auto is a pretty solid damage combo. The base damage is very, very high. And then lastly, but with her ultimate, it gives her, a good execute, but more importantly, gives her a really good knockback. So Tristana is really, really hard to get to between her really long range, her rocket jump, and her buster shot. And if you build Blade of the Ruin King, she's got possibly the highest amount of self-peel in the game, which is why I've placed Tristana kind of in this upper list of tier 2. The reason why I don't have her in tier 1 is because her laning and specifically her mid game isn't that strong. There is a time where her abilities really fall off because there's no AD scaling, and her attack speed hasn't really kicked in yet because she doesn't have all that crit. If she only has Infinity Edge, her Q really isn't that great until she can get a little more crit chance. So she doesn't have the best laning. She doesn't have the best mid game, but because she's got so much self peel, she's very independent. And she's got such strong late-game carry potential. That's kind of why I've placed her here. So overall, I think she's definitely a strong champion. But, her mid-game power dip is definitely something, I think, that really holds her back. And is probably the biggest reason why she's not in Tier 1. Just because the mid-game is so crucial in solo queue. So anyways, my next champion is going to be Graves. Graves is definitely the best burst AD carry. I think he's got the best burst out of any AD carry. And if you want to go, specifically for like a kill lane, if you get paired up with another support who's got a lot of burst, someone like maybe Annie or Tarek, Graves can do really, really well. He just has such tremendous burst. His Q and his R it gives him tremendous upfront burst. His level 6 kill potential is very, very high. One of the stronger AD casters. There are a couple other really things. I think his passive is understated. It really helps him to be tanky, and it helps him to just give him that little bit of extra survivability, which I think he really needs because he is a little bit short-ranged. And then also his smoke screen is a very underrated ability. Specifically, the vision denial is really, really good. If you're fighting in the jungle, you can almost you can really cripple an enemy team's ability to fight in a closed environment just because they don't have any vision. And this can really turn around team fights, specifically for the vision denial. And then also his quick draw is just a really, really strong dash ability. You can use it defensively to get away, but it's also really, really good used offensively because it gives him an attack speed boost, and the cooldown gets lowered by every auto attack. So definitely one of the better offensive dash abilities. Anytime Graves quick draws in, he's just going to do a ton of damage with a quick draw, QR, auto attack, smoke screen. He's going to really do a ton of burst. The main thing that's holding Graves back is definitely his range. Once he throws out his Q and his ultimate, his range is very, very weak, and it just gives him a lot of danger. And even though he does get, some tankiness from his passive, that's not going to be enough, specifically in a late game situation, to really thrive. Graves is more about synergizing with kind of AoE wombo combos rather than synergizing with, these typical AD carries who can shred down tanks and be really safe and stay in the back. Graves is very risky and dangerous in that regard. But I think he's definitely still a strong pick for these kind of kill lanes, do a ton of burst damage, and be very scary. Just brings a lot of damage to the table overall. So next up on my tier list is going to be Twitch. So a couple things to say about Twitch. He kind of had a little bit of a flavor of the month during the spring or summer split of the LCS. I'm not quite sure when some of the other AD carries got nerfed, specifically Draven. I think Twitch kind of filled in that niche where Draven was very, very nicely. And Twitch does a couple of things really, really well. So, first of all, he has really, really good trading in lane, specifically because of his passive and his expunge. It makes it very difficult to come out ahead of trades with Twitch. You know, if he throws his W, gets 6 auto attacks, and then expunges, it's just really hard for other AD carries to trade against that in lane. And so his laning is very strong. His kill potential is very, very high. Specifically with someone like Blitzcrank. If Blitzcrank can get a pull, you can throw down your Venom Cask, you know, auto attack a bunch, expunge. It's going to be a really, really strong combo that's almost securing a kill. You know, or Leona or Taric, any of these other champions that have these really good lockdown potential with high kill potential. Twitch works really, really well in those types of lanes. He also has his Q, which is really, really unique. The stealth is really, really good. And it also gives him a nice attack speed buff. So the stealth can be used defensively to get away. It's kind of what his version of a escape is by using his ambush. Also, you can use this offensively to sneak up on someone. Specifically, if you're opposing AD carry, you kind of get to like a mid-game situation. Maybe you've got to play the Ruin King. You can sneak up on somebody who's kind of all on their own. Maybe your opponent AD carry, if their support is roaming. You can throw your expunge or your Venom Cask. You get the slow from the Blade of the Ruin King, and you can pretty much secure a kill with uses of ambush. You know, specifically in solo queue, this is a really good ability to pick yourselves up some kills or set up some kills. It's just really good Twitch players can use ambush to really, really high extent. And then also the big reason why Twitch is strong is his spray and pray. Giving 850 range, the bonus attack damage, and doing the AoE is really, really good. You could argue that Twitch is one of the best late game hyper carries just because of his potential to sit way in the back and AoE down the entire enemy team. You know, with other AD carries, in order to get AoE, they have to do something weird like build Runan's Hurricane or something stupid like that. But Twitch, his AoE damage is really, really high, and it makes him really strong. Now, the thing about Twitch is he doesn't have any sort of repositioning skill, so you really have to be good at kiting. He also doesn't really have any CC other than his Venom Cask. So that leaves him a little bit, you know, other AD carries that don't, you know, his ambush is kind of a repositioning tool, sort of, but, you know, I don't know, he just doesn't have the same sort of safety. He requires a little bit more peel than some of the other AD carries, but I still think he's a strong pick in solo queue, just not like, you know, specifically if you want to play somebody like Twitch, you know, I don't know, he's a little bit unique. He doesn't really have anybody that he compares to, but he definitely does have his weaknesses, that he requires a little bit more peel. He doesn't have any sort of blink ability. Assassins can give him a lot of trouble. And, you know, definitely a champion that has his strengths, but also has his weaknesses. Next up, after Twitch, is going to be Varus. It's almost as if, like, I'm missing something, or like these guys aren't. I'm just going to do this. So next up on the list is Varus. Varus is, I think his best comparison would be Jinx. I think Varus and Jinx, perhaps, or maybe Ashe. But Varus is kind of in an interesting place. So he is kind of a mix between auto attack and caster. He's got really, really good abilities. He's got tremendous range. He's got really, really strong range. You know, his piercing arrow, 1475 range. Hail of arrows, 925. His basic attack range, 575. It's really, really good. So very, very long range. He trades really well in lane with his bladed quiver. You know, you've got these auto attacks. And then when you use an ability, you can pop that to deal the bonus damage. So his trading potential in lane is really, really good. It's very, very difficult for people to kind of deal with him in terms of trading effectively. And then also the thing that Varus has that makes him unique is he's got this like AoE lockdown crowd control, which no other AD carry I think has, to my knowledge, is this like AoE potential. So, you know, with a really hard engage AoE wombo combo lockdown team, Varus works really, really well. You know, the CC really allows you to, if you can land a good chain of corruption and work it in conjunction with your teammates' hard crowd control, it's just a really powerful combination in a team fight. Now, Varus does have some big-time weaknesses. Specifically, he has absolutely no way of escaping. His only way of dealing with people coming at him is his hail of arrows with the slow. But, you know, other than that, he has no way of dealing with people who get on top of him. So very, very susceptible to assassins. And specifically, if people can ever get on top of Varus, he's very, very weak. And so that's kind of why I don't have him higher on the list. But if you can use Varus correctly and you can kind of coordinate with your team, specifically with his ultimate, he can be very, very powerful. However, in solo queue, I really think mobility is important enough that I can't really place him much higher on my list. So anyways, that rounds out my tier 2. Now we're moving into tier 3. And these are some champions that I think that are kind of in a bit of a poor place. I'm going to start with Corki. So Corki was like God tier a little bit ago. Well, Corki's kind of been all over the place, roller coaster ride. He was really, really good, I think, in Season 2. Then he got nerfed, and he was trashed here, like totally unplayed for quite a while. His mana costs were too high. He just didn't do enough damage. He didn't really have this like kit synergy. It's just kind of strange. But then he got a slow set of buffs with his mana costs. And then the big Triforce buff really skyrocketed Corki into prominence, and specifically around the World Finals. He was like pick ban every game, just a very dominant AD carry. But since then he's been nerfed. His ultimate got nerfed pretty heavily, and they changed his Q most recently. And just to be honest, I've kind of had a bad taste in my mouth. I've played him a little bit since these recent set of nerfs, and I just don't have the same sense that I did before. I think he really fell pretty hard. I think there's an argument to be made that he still could be in tier 2, which is why I have him at the very top of tier 3, and he still maybe even could be, I don't know, I think Corki's hard to place right now because I think that's like specifically the Phosphorus Bomb change and the Missile Barrage, like this cooldown change, really hit him hard. Specifically this Phosphorus Bomb change. I played a game with Corki yesterday, and I really didn't care for the change to Phosphorus Bomb. He's kind of got a weird kit. His Phosphorus Bomb is his best ability pre-6, but has no AD scaling. He's an AD caster, yet his passive rewards his auto attacks. His Missile Barrage is really core, but the cooldown got reduced, and it's really beneficial once you get Triforce. He just kind of has a bit of a wonky kit, but he does have a good repositioning tool on his Valkyrie. He's got good armor shred on his E. He's got good trading and lane with his Q, although recently I've kind of questioned that a little bit. I don't know. I think Corki is somebody who I still want to give more time with and kind of feel him out with these new Season 4 changes, but he just isn't my favorite right now. And like I said, the recent set of nerfs has definitely left a bad taste in my mouth. So next up after Corki is going to be Draven. Now, a couple things about Draven. So Draven was really, really good, and then they changed his passive, which I think was a fairly substantial nerf. The thing about Draven was that he was for a while the best early game AD carry. Specifically his spinning axis and his passive made it impossible to trade with him, just because he did so much damage, just so much bonus AD from his Q, made him really hard to deal with. And when they nerfed his passive is much more of a scaling, gives him gold throughout kind of the mid game, but it really took away some of his early game power. And with Draven, it was always kind of a situation where you need to kind of snowball, pick up some early kills, and then get going. And if you don't do that, you're just going to be kind of weak. So Draven not having that passive, he's kind of a weaker choice, I think. Still really good if you're able to go really ham, and he pairs really well with some aggressive supports like Leona or Taric. But without the early kills, I think he's weak. He doesn't have a repositioning tool outside of his W, which is a kind of a weak movement speed buff. Although he does have a CC with his stand aside. I don't know. I think Draven is a little bit too feast famine risk reward. It's hard to consistently get fed on him. Whereas before it was maybe a little too easy. Now I think it's a little bit too hard. So that's just kind of my take on Draven. I also think for solo queue, he's harder to play. Specifically, catching his axes requires a little bit more extra micro. Because he doesn't have such good range, like he just doesn't function as well in team fights because he's very hard to play. And you always have to make this decision of this choice of, do I go for that spinning axe or do I lay back and focus on my positioning? If you don't get the spinning axe, your DPS drops pretty significantly. So yeah, that's just kind of my take on Draven. I think he's good, but I definitely think that you have to be in the right hands and with the right lane matchup. Not good in every situation. Next up would be Ashe. Ashe is probably one of the more weaker laning AD carries. Her trading is very low. She just doesn't really bring much damage. I mean, her really only damage is her volley, and just like look at this base damage is really pitiful. Compared to like an Ezreal or something, it's just very, very weak damage. But the thing about Ashe is she's very binary. She has tremendous utility, perhaps the best utility out of all AD carries, with an on-demand slow and her arrow, which is really, really good for initiation. But then on top of that, she has no repositioning skill, no way to speed herself up or blink away. All she has is her kiting potential with her slow, and that can make it really difficult for her to deal with assassins and highly mobile bruisers. Somebody like Jax or Zed is just going to wreck Ashe over and over again. The main thing that kind of redeems Ashe is her arrow. Her arrow is a really good ability. It's a fantastic team fight initiation, perhaps one of the longest potential stuns in the entire game. It really is what saves her. Because if you can get some good initiations off, if you've got damage mixed throughout your entire team with low, she works really well with someone like Shyvana or other champions like that who have a lot of damage but don't have a lot of utility. Ashe can kind of fill that niche. But I definitely think in solo queue she's a little bit weaker just because you're going to die because people are going to get on top of you. There's really nothing you can do about it. So she can't really hard carry like other AD carries, but what she can do is initiate good team fights and provide her team with a lot of utility. Next up is going to be Miss Fortune. Miss Fortune I think is kind of similar to Ashe, although Miss Fortune has really good laning. It's probably one of the main reasons to play Miss Fortune. Her passive is really good in lane, and her Q is really good in lane. So like an auto Q auto, maybe with a W or a Make It Rain involved, is going to be a really strong trading combo. So her laning is really good, and she does have a nice auto attack steroid on her W. She's got some CC on her E, but the real thing draw to Miss Fortune is her ultimate. She works really well in these kind of AoE wombo combos, with somebody like Kennen or Malphite or Draven, any of these other champions that rely on maybe also Rumble, that kind of locking down the entire team in a narrow passageway. If Miss Fortune can get a full bullet time off, she can be really, really good. But again, her only mobility is on her passive, and like I said, if an assassin or a bruiser jumps on you, you're probably just going to die. Your Make It Rain is your only crowd control, and that's not a very good, reliable peel, self-peel. You need to have some peel from your support, and you need to be very careful about when you throw out your bullet time. So yeah, Miss Fortune is definitely a little bit harder to kind of self-carry, doesn't really have the self-peel, doesn't really have, very reliant on her team to kind of help her out, which I don't think that's the main reason why I have her lower on my list. Next up is going to be Quinn. I still think Quinn is a little bit misunderstood. I think she has her place, but she just definitely hasn't really panned out, I think. Oh, not health regen. She hasn't really panned out like I think people hoped. She's low range, and the biggest thing is her ultimate gives her this weird kit identity problem, and as an AD carry, this is not a good ultimate for an AD carry. You can use it to clean up fights, but in terms of mid fight, there's just not a lot she can do. She's got short range, she's got a good blind, and she's got a good vault, so she does have some self peel, and also her passive is really, really good for trading in lane. But I just don't really think that. The best part about her kit is definitely her passive. Like an auto. If Harrier procs, you can get an auto, an E, an auto, and you get the nice buff from the W with the move speed and the attack speed, and then throw in maybe a blinding assault as well. It gives her really good trading in lane. But I think the big problem here is her kit identity. Is she melee? Is she range? Is she a bruiser? Is she an AD carry? I don't know. I think she's a little bit too confused, and it's one of those things where somebody is going to need to find a team composition or a laning type thing that really fits Quinn, and I'm just not sure that the community is. It's kind of like a meta thing. I'm just not sure that the community has really figured out where to play her best. Next up would be Kog'Maw. I actually really enjoy playing Kog'Maw, but I think in solo queue he's not very strong. Kog'Maw is right up there in terms of damage. Compared to Vayne, he's right up there. His W specifically, when his W is up, his damage is tremendous. Getting that bonus range and the bonus percentage of max health on hit is really, really good. and it makes him very, very, like I said, his damage is through the roof. But he's got extremely weak self-peel. His only self-peel is his Void Ooze, which is an AoE slow. But other than that, he requires peel. And in solo queue, you're just not going to get that. So if you can play in like a ranked 5 situation where you can get, very consistent, reliable peel, or if you have a support like Janna who you can trust to peel for you, Kog'Maw can be really, really good. Also, if the enemy team comp doesn't have a lot of dive, doesn't have a lot of assassins, Kog'Maw can be really good. But in solo queue, all of those things are not going to happen. There are going to be assassins, there are going to be divers, there are going to be people gunning for you, and your team is probably not going to peel for you, and so you're just going to die. Where I play Kog'Maw, I feel like I get a lot of kills, but I also die a lot, and so it's just, for solo queue, I don't think it works the best to reliably carry games. Then last up, I have Urgot. I don't even know if I should mention him just because he's in a bad place right now. Urgot's Call to Flame is that he is a really strong lane bully. He's a really good AD caster. Specifically, his EQQQ combo is really, really good. But his late gaming, his team fighting is not very good. His ultimate is not very good on an AD carry. You almost never want to use this to put yourself in the middle of the enemy team. His shield is kind of weird on an AD carry. Just kind of a strange champion. I'm not even really sure that he is even a AD carry. He's more of a bruiser, kind of an AD carry form. But anyways, that's kind of my tier 3. So yeah, overall, I'd really like to hear your guys' thoughts on my tier list. If you want to see more like this, or if you want me to expand it to other roles, I can definitely consider doing that. And so definitely let me know down in the comment section below your thoughts. If you disagree with me, please let me know, and I'd love to have a conversation about it. And I'll see you guys again soon. Bye.